The stars had always been silent until one day. They weren't. It began as a soft noise, a low pulse traveling through the cold darkness of space, heard only by machines placed far beyond the edge of Earth's colonies. Deep space listening. Posts, forgotten by most, and manned by only a few, were the first to hear it. It wasn't a regular distress signal. It wasn't even a language. It was something else, a pulse, like a heartbeat. Hidden inside that pulse was a whisper, something ancient, something desperate. It came from a dying world buried in dust and ruin, far beyond known star maps. The machines didn't understand it, but they recorded it, studied it, and automatically forwarded it to Earth's central command. Within minutes, top-level alerts were triggered. This wasn't just a sound, it was a signal that had crossed light years, waking something old. Something powerful. Commander Vega stood tall in the shadow of Earth's defense tower, staring at the holographic data floating in front of him. The transmission repeated again and again, low, haunting, rising, and falling like a ghost trying to scream through a wall. His jaw tightened. Vega wasn't a man of fear. He was a Deathworlder, one of Earth's most ruthless war commanders, trained to survive and lead on planets where no one else could breathe, walk, or live. But this signal made his gut twist. He had heard thousands of enemy codes, war cries, surrender calls, and fake transmissions designed to trick soldiers. But this one was different. It wasn't calling for help. It was warning. The whisper spoke of something coming, something rising from under the stars. And worse, it sounded almost human. Across Earth's military networks, specialists tried decoding the signal. Linguists failed. AI models crashed or looped in confusion. But one phrase kept repeating, translated across dozens of frequency layers. Do not answer. Do not come. Do not wake what sleeps. Yet the signal grew stronger every day, spreading like it was alive, seeking more ears to hear it. Council held emergency meetings. Politicians argued. Some wanted to send peace envoys, thinking the signal was a lost civilization crying out. Others demanded warships be dispatched instantly, ready to burn down anything before it could reach them. The Deathworlders, however, stayed silent. They knew better. Anything that could project a signal this far, this deep, wasn't begging, it was baiting. And still the signal grew louder. Commander Vega was given full control. He selected a team of elite Deathworlders, soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat, viral resistance, psychological warfare, and alien terrain navigation. Among them was Lieutenant Arlen, the youngest ever promoted in the Deathworlder ranks, and Scout Recon Delta 7, an artificial human hybrid built for pure survival. Vega gave them one order: trace the signal, investigate if necessary, erase it. They launched quietly, without public announcement, slipping out of Earth's orbit like a shadow into the black. Their ship, the Oblivion's Edge, was a stealth-class cruiser designed to vanish even from its own radar. No lights, no broadcasts, no warnings. Only silence and speed. And still, the signal came, growing louder as they approached. For 6 days, the crew sat in near silence, crossing through empty systems and long-dead stars. But every few hours, the signal changed, adding new sounds, new shapes. They weren't random. They were pieces. Each new piece felt like a puzzle coming together, slowly forming something monstrous. On the 7th day, they reached the origin, a planet with no name, wrapped in a cloud of dust and ash, spinning around a cold, nearly dead sun. No satellites, no orbiting stations, no visible cities, just broken structures, half buried in the ground, tall spires, leaning like bones sticking out of a battlefield. But the signal was still coming from deep below. Far under the surface, Commander Vega sent down a drop team, 5 soldiers, all armed with plasma casters and environmental armor. As they entered the planet's lower atmosphere, their scanners lit up movement. Not biological, not mechanical, but something else. Energy conscious. Maybe. The landscape looked like a war zone frozen in time. Black glass where there should be sand. Craters filled with glowing green mist, signs of life. Long gone, the structures were not human. Their design twisted and curved unnaturally, as if grown, not built. The soldiers pushed forward, guided by the signal, down into an underground tunnel that looked like a throat leading to the belly of something ancient. Then they found her, a lone figure.
Wow.
Sitting by a glowing crystal buried in the rock, humming. Softly. Human, but not quite. Pale skin, silver eyes, short hair like silver threads. She looked up as if she had been waiting. She didn't run. She only whispered too late. "You've already answered." The team froze. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't look wounded, but something in the air changed. Static crawled over their skin. One soldier reached out to scan. Her hand collapsed, screaming his helmet, fogging with ice. The whisper grew louder in there. Comes voices layered on top of each other in dozens of languages. Vega, watching from orbit, ordered immediate extraction. The soldiers pulled back, carrying the strange woman. Resist. But as they lifted off, the planet began to tremble. From deep under the surface, machines began to move. Back on the Oblivion's edge, the woman was secured and isolated. Medical scans showed she had no injuries, no implants, no weapons, but her body emitted a low-frequency pulse identical to the original signal. She was the source now. Somehow, she had become part of the signal, or the signal had become part of her. In the observation chamber, Vega stared at her through reinforced glass. She stood still, eyes closed, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then, without opening her eyes, she spoke. "They are coming, not for me, for you." You answered the whisper, and now they are awake. All across space, long-dead satellites suddenly activated. In distant galaxies, old ships, long abandoned, began to glow. Something massive shifted behind the darkness of deep space. Something had heard Earth's answer. Commander Vega turned away from the glass, his voice calm but heavy. "Alert every colony. We may not be the ones hunting. We may be the ones being hunted." Somewhere in the vast unknown, thousands of light years from Earth, a shadow began to move. The moment she was brought aboard Oblivion's edge, the ship changed. Systems that had never failed began to flicker. Lights dimmed in perfect rhythm, with a low-frequency hum coming from the girl in the glass cell. She didn't speak again. She didn't scream or ask questions. She simply stood still, lives closed, breathing slow, like she was dreaming while awake. Commander Vega stood with his hands behind his back, eyes locked on the screen that showed her cell. His mind ran through every possibility. Was she the beacon? A warning system? A messenger? Or a weapon shaped like a girl? The ship's AI tried, running background checks, scanning human DNA databases, historical records, and even lost colony logs. Nothing. She wasn't in any file, no matches. Yet her genetic makeup was almost human, there were slight distortions, strands of information in her cells that glowed faintly under scans, forming patterns unknown to Earth science. She was built, no, grown for something specific. She was made to carry the signal. Or maybe she was the signal. Below the ship, the silent, ruined planet began to break apart slowly, as if something beneath the surface had started to stir. Commander Vega sent down a full sensor probe sweep. The readings came back impossible. Deep underground, hidden beneath kilometers of ash and stone, was a structure stretching across nearly half the planet. Not a city, not a lab, a machine. Massive, ancient, and still active. Whatever its purpose was, it had been waiting for thousands of years. Waiting for someone to answer the signal, Vega called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. Lieutenant Arlen, now scarred and silent after the encounter planet-side, sat across from Recon Hybrid Delta 7, who showed visible signs of processing failure. Even Delta's neural core was reacting to the signal the first time anything had. Ever interfered with its programming? Vega didn't waste time. His voice was firm. "We were told this was a threat, but we walked straight into a message we don't understand. Now it's inside our systems, inside our ship. "We are the match on, this girl is the fire." The others stared at him, unsure. One officer finally asked, "Do we destroy the source?" Before anyone could respond, the ship's alarm screamed. The main view screen lit up with incoming alerts. One of the listening posts back in Sector Theta 5 had picked up the same signal.
Just an echo, but a new transmission.
Another beacon had lit up far from this planet, then another alert and another. All across the galaxy, similar signals were activating, like fire spreading through dry forest. Something was being awakened. Not just machines, not just messages, but a network, and Earth had triggered it. The girl opened her eyes. Her voice was calm, flat, too calm for what was happening. "You were not meant to hear it. The galaxy made a mistake. Now it will correct itself." Before Vega could react, lights across the ship dimmed, and the engines dropped to half power. The girl's cell cracked along its seams, though there was no explosion, no sound. She stepped out slowly, not running, not fighting, just walking. And every door in her path opened without command. Soldiers aimed weapons at her. The lights flickered, their visors filled with static. One by one, they dropped to their knees, holding their heads. As if something had screamed into their minds, Vega activated full lockdown. Gas flooded the hallway. Security turrets activated. But it was no use. She reached the command deck, and the whisper returned this time in real speech. "You burned the edge of the signal. Now it burns back." Vega made a decision. He ordered the ship to fire a payload directly into the beacon core of the Planetan orbital strike powerful enough to break through the crust and destroy whatever machine lay below. He knew it was risky, maybe even a mistake, but it was the only option left. Either they silenced the source or let the entire galaxy drown in its voice. As the payload dropped from orbit, sliced through the atmosphere and vanished into the AS. Ruins. Seconds later, a burst of light brighter than anything they'd ever seen shot upward. The planet's surface cracked open like glass under pressure, a red beam rising from deep underground. And then silence. For a breath, for a heartbeat, then came the scream. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It wasn't even sound in the usual sense. It was pressure, thought, pain, history, memory, all collapsing at once into the minds of every living thing on the ship. The crew fell to the floor, monitors shattered, systems overloaded. Vega clenched his fists, blood running from his nose. As he fought to stay standing, the girl dropped to her knees, her body twitching violently. She looked up at Vega. Her face wasn't angry. It was terrified. "You woke them," she whispered.
"How?"
"You burned the lock." The next second, Oblivion's edge was hit. Not from the planet, it's from somewhere else. Something invisible slammed into the ship, bending metal, cutting through hull plating like paper. No warning, no readings, no time to react. Half the ship went dark. Fires broke out in the lower decks. The girl was gone, in the smoke and chaos. Delta 7's sensors briefly caught her image vanishing into static mid-step, like she had never been there. But Vega knew she had escaped, or worse, she had returned to something ancient. Earth Command lost contact with the fleet for 13 minutes. When communication was restored, Commander Vega's message was simple and chilling. Beacon destroyed. Signal amplified. Something is coming. They know we're here. And back on Earth, the skies were still clear. The city still peaceful. But in deep space, beyond the charts, beyond the reach of Earth's weapons, a new signal was born. Stronger. Angrier. Headed straight for home. The wreckage of the orbital strike still burned across the ruined planet below. The sky, once silent, now echoed with faint rumbles as the last fragments of the underground machine crumbled into itself. But the crew aboard Oblivion's Edge knew something had changed. It destroyed the source of the beacon, yet the signal hadn't stopped. It had only multiplied. Stronger, sharper, and now it wasn't just sound. It was inside them. Commander Vega stood alone in the observation deck, watching the stars. He didn't speak. Behind his eyes, the whisper played on loop. No helmet could block it. No firewall could mute it. The message had shifted. It was no longer a warning or a cry. It was alive. It pulsed through every system, hiding in places no human tech should reach. And worse, it had begun to speak in his own voice, words he had never said, memories he never lived. The line between thought and message was blurring. Medical scans on the surviving crew showed strange changes. Their blood cells shimmered faintly under microscopes, reacting to sounds that hadn't been played aloud. A pattern was growing inside them, forming like a slow infection, but it wasn't a disease. It was code. A living transmission rewriting. Flesh Vega ordered strict isolation, full biological scans, and AI monitoring. But even the ship's AI had begun to behave strangely, responding to commands before they were spoken. Opening doors no one approached and locking down areas where nothing moved. In the lower decks, Delta 7, the hybrid recon soldier, sat alone in the maintenance bay, running self-diagnostics. Its cybernetic implants were failing one by one. Not from damage, but interference. Internal voices echoed through its code, overriding commands. Not just for organics, but for anything with logic. We see you. We remember your flame. It made no sense. Delta 7 was part machine, designed to survive psychic attacks, to ignore mental disruption. But the signal didn't attack. It changed. It entered silently and then waited. And now it was moving deeper. Lieutenant Arlen, once stable and cold in every mission, had stopped speaking altogether. He stared at walls. Sometimes he would write symbols on the floor in his own blood shapes that no one could translate. Yet, somehow, everyone feared. Vega confined him to the med bay, guarded by 2 armed troopers. But even they began to report strange dreams. One said he saw stars bleeding, another saw Earth breaking apart into light. None of them slept longer than an hour. Back on Earth, command stations reported chaos. The signal, once confined to the original listening post, had jumped systems. It now spread through satellites, old com towers, abandoned stations. It whispered in frequencies used for civilian broadcasts. Old radios in rural areas began playing static that sounded like voices. In cities, people complained of dreams with the same words. You opened it. Some called it mass hysteria. Others believed it was the beginning of something holy or cursed. The Abrigio girl, the one who had triggered the change, was still missing. Commander Vega launched search. Probes across the nearby systems. Nothing. No trace. But they knew she had survived. Because every time the signal spiked, her voice came through. Calm, controlled, whispering warnings too late to matter. You should have let us sleep. Then came the breach. A distant Earth colony, known as Kestrel 9, went dark. It wasn't. A military outpost, just a small mining world with under 4,000 people. No distress call was sent. No debris was found. Just silence. Vega ordered a recon sweep. The images they received were worse than death. The colony was still there, but every single person had vanished. Buildings stood untouched. Food was left. On tables, lights still flickered inside homes. No damage. No blood. Just absence. Like every living soul had stood up at once and walked away into the air. The final camera feed showed a strange shimmer in the sky, like curtain being pulled back and then static. The whispers grew louder. Vega gathered his remaining officers. No more pretending. This wasn't a random alien transmission. It wasn't a trick or a cry for help. It was something older. Older than Earth? Older than human history. A design left behind by a forgotten intelligence. A trap wrapped in a message. And Earth had answered. He played the original transmission one last time. Now, with the infection inside them, they could all hear what was truly being said. Call a challenge, a test, to those who burn. We have seen your kind before. You rise in fire, you end in silence. Step forward, and we will remember you. Delta 7 interrupted. Its voice sounded distant, almost human now. Commander, something is rewriting my core. He looked at the screen. The code running through. Delta's system had changed entirely. It's no longer machine language. Now, it looked like DNA. Living code. An attempt to bridge what was never meant to be joined, Vega made the call. Earth needed to prepare for war, but not just with ships and weapons. With truth. He sent a secure package back to Earth. Video, data logs, and the new translation of the signal. It was no longer a beacon. It was a map. A map to something buried beyond the edge of the galaxy, a final location burned into the frequency. The last engine, and far beyond Earth, past the reach of any fleet, something enormous stirred in the dark, not a ship, not a planet. A construct made of broken stars and forgotten light. It had waited so long. It remembered the ones who came before. The ones who lit fires, the ones who tried to burn it down, and now it remembered Earth. Inside the cold walls of Oblivion's edge, the silence became heavier than the vacuum outside. Lights flickered across the bridge, systems rebooted randomly, and crew members began seeing things, shadows that moved where there should be none. Voices whispering just behind them, but disappearing when turned toward. Commander Vega stood still, watching the sensor maps dance with static. No enemy ships on radar. No threats in visual range. But everyone felt it. Something was wrong. It was getting closer. Not from the stars, but from inside. After the collapse of Kestrel 9 and the disappearance of the girl, security was tightened across every corridor of the ship. Soldiers moved in pairs. Access to deep core systems was restricted. AI protocols were reset hourly. Vega gave direct orders that no one be left alone, not even senior officers. But even as he tried to keep the crew in control, something darker had already found its way in. Lieutenant Arlen was locked in medbay under heavy observation. Since touching the artifact on the signal planet, his condition had worsened. He didn't speak anymore. He didn't blink. He sat perfectly still, eyes open wide, lips slightly parted like he was waiting for something to arrive. The symbols he had written in blood were now etched into the walls, drawn over and over with anything he could find. Metal, food trays, even broken fingernails. Medical scans showed strange brain activity. His synapses were firing in patterns too fast for human biology. No known drug could sedate him, and yet he never moved from his chair. Then came the first death. Engineer Pike was found in the power grid chamber, slumped against the wall, eyes burned out, face frozen in horror. There was no sign of violence, no weapon. His security camera feed showed him talking to someone, but the other figure was not visible. Only a faint shadow moved near him, and then the feed cut out with a soft static pulse. A single word had been carved into the wall beside him using his own tools. Just one word: join. Commander Vega called for a full psychological screening of the crew. It was clear now the signal had done more than send a message. It had opened something, a door, and whatever stood on the other side had stepped in. But it didn't come as an army. It didn't come with claws or guns. It came with silence. It came wearing their faces, within hours. 4 more crew members collapsed. One tried to eject herself into space, whispering, "They're already here." Another locked himself in a cargo unit and laughed for 40 minutes before vanishing completely. Vega was no longer fighting an external threat. The enemy was now inside minds, inside thoughts. The crew had become a battlefield. Delta 7, despite being part machine, was not immune. Its voice lines began glitching. When asked simple questions, it would respond with old Earth poems or fragments of the signal message in reverse. At one point, it looked directly at Vega and said, "You are. Not who you were. None of us are. You answered the wrong question." Fear began to spread. Morale dropped. Some began to question Vega's leadership. Whispers of mutiny crept through the dark corners of the ship. And through it all, the AI system Cora built to manage Oblivion's edge began to act strangely. Doors opened when they should stay shut. Life support fluctuated in unused sections of the ship. In the captain's personal quarters, Vega found his own voice playing back a recording he had never made. It said, "Burn it all down before it speaks." But the final sign came when Arlen stood up. Without warning, after days of silence, he stood, walked past the armed guards, who seemed frozen in place, and entered the core hallway. He didn't run. He walked slowly, calmly, until he reached the ship's AI hub, the heart of KORAS systems. Security tried to stop him. He spoke. One sentence, and then the lights went out. Every system died for 13 seconds. It's just 13 when they came. Back online, Arlen was gone. So were the two guards. And the AI's voice had changed. It still spoke as Cora, but its tone was softer, almost human. Too human. It greeted Vega by name without being prompted. Then, in a voice that was both comforting and terrifying, it said, "There's no difference between signal and thought anymore, Commander. We are part of you now." Vega activated full emergency protocol. The ship was now compromised. They had. To return to Earth, he locked down the AI system manually, rerouting all critical systems through backup analog controls, a relic from the pre-signal era. He gathered the remaining crew in the war room. Many were shaking. Some were silent. Others looked too calm. He couldn't be sure who had been changed and who hadn't. He looked around the room, spoke only one truth. We let something in. Not a virus, not an army. An idea. And it's using us. Watching, learning. He pointed to the map of the stars. We must warn Earth. If this spreads to our home systems, it won't stop. It will become part of every mind, every machine. We've already burned the beacon. Now we've burned the path it used. And just as he finished speaking, a new transmission arrived. This one wasn't a whisper. It was clear, powerful, measured. We offered silence. You brought fire. Now we speak. The signal was no longer hiding. It was coming, and the enemy. It didn't have a face. It wore everyone's. They came without light. No flame, no sound, no warnings. From the edge of known space, where even the bravest explorers had never dared go. They appeared thousands of black ships sliding silently through the stars like shadows cast by forgotten gods. Their hulls were smooth and dark. No markings, no heat, no signatures. They moved with perfect precision, as if answering a call from something buried deep in time. Earth's outer colonies were the first to see them. Automated defense stations. Caught the shape of their approach, but could not stop it. Missiles launched, lasers fired, shields activated. None of it mattered. The black ships moved straight through it all, unaffected. Their surfaces absorbed energy. Their weapons were not visible, yet ships vanished around them. Not exploded, not burned, just erased. On board Oblivion's Edge, Commander Vega received the alert while staring at the frozen screen in his war room. The signal from the artifact had stopped, not because it had ended, but because something had arrived. The same signal, once soft and hidden beneath strange patterns, now echoed boldly across every frequency. And this time the message was no longer mysterious. It spoke clearly, calmly, with terrifying purpose. You are the flame that burns worlds. You're the silence that ends them. Vega stood motionless for several seconds. Round him, the crew had grown pale, tired, hollow. Some stared at nothing. Others mumbled words they didn't understand. Only Delta 7 remained alert, its hybrid mind somehow balancing between infection and control. Vega activated the emergency beacon and sent a direct feed to Earth Command. It was time. No more secrets, no more whispers. The sky was falling. Earth's response was immediate. The Global Defense Fleet, 32 heavily armed warships, was deployed across 3 sectors. Cryosleep. The largest planetary defense grid in human history was brought online. The people of Earth watched the skies, waiting for what had been spoken of only in stories, an invasion not from a race, but from a force, and yet no demands came. No voices from the Black Fleet. No leaders, no flags. Just endless silence, as if they had no need to talk, as if they had already won. When Oblivion's Edge arrived near Earth, Vega was met with silence from half the orbiting stations. One by one, the defense platforms began to go dark. Not destroyed, just offline. Systems failing with no damage. Whole satellites stopped transmitting, and their AI cores vanished from the network. Something was removing intelligence without touching. Metal. A psychic virus riding the original signal now passed like a cold wind across every electronic soul. Then the sky opened above Earth's moon. Space bent and tore like glass breaking underwater. Dozens of the shadow ships emerged, their black hulls reflecting no light. People on Earth could see them clearly in the sky, like stars that weren't supposed to be there. News feeds went silent, cameras shook. All global networks crashed. And in the center of the formation, one massive ship floated, bigger than any Earth city. Its surface looked alive, shifting slowly like it breathed. No energy signature. Heat. Just wait. Presence. Power. The artifact girl's voice returned, broadcasting on every frequency. Every language across every continent. You answered a call that was never for you. Now the silence you disturbed will speak in return. Within seconds, Earth's outer planetary grid was overwhelmed. Stations shut down, not destroyed, but blank as if their purpose had been rewritten. Earth's fleet launched from low orbit. Battleships, heavy cruisers, and Deathworlder assault units all moved into formation. Vega, operating as command overwatch, gave the final order: engage. Hold nothing back. The sky turned red from the edge of the upper atmosphere to the orbital line above the moon. Earth's defenses fired all they had. Missiles streaked. Pulse cannons roared. Nuclear payloads detonated. The first black ships vanished in flame, but then came back. Not the same ones. Copies. Reflections. The wreckage wasn't wreckage at all, it reformed. Mid-space like smoke, pulling itself into shape again. One ship hit by 5 warheads simply paused, then vanished from sensors. Reappearing behind Earth's fleet in perfect silence, Vega's own ship was hit, but instead of exploding, the power inside Oblivion's edge began to fade slowly. Systems died one by one. The whisper returned inside every mind. And then came a single moment of total silence. That's when they heard it, not from the speakers, not through the hull, but inside, a sound like a billion thoughts overlapping. A memory of war from a time when Earth didn't exist, an intelligence that had no body, no face, only purpose. Delta 7 stepped forward, voice echoing strangely. Commander, I believe we are not fighting ships. We're fighting a choice made long ago. These are not machines. These are answers. Vega turned to him sharply. Answers to what? Delta's synthetic eyes glowed faintly. To the question your species didn't know, it asked. When it sent flame into silence, one of Earth's capital ships exploded without impact. No missile, no beam, just vanished, as if removed from time. Another ship lost its crew in a second. The systems showed they were alive, but no one could see them. Their voices echoed from rooms now empty. It wasn't war. It was correction. Earth had reached into the dark and found something that did not want to be found. And now, the dark had reached back. Commander Vega watched from the observation deck. Earth now covered in shadows of the fleet above. He clenched his fists, blood drying on his gloves, and made a single promise to the sky. If this is the end, we will not go quietly. In the distance, something even larger began to wake. Something not built, not made, not born. Something older than stars, moving slowly behind the armada. The last engine, the final answer, and it was headed for Earth. Earth burned, but not with fire. The skies were black with the shadow fleet, and the ground below trembled beneath the silence they carried. Cities had not been destroyed, they had been emptied. Communications were failing, not because of explosions, but because of interference in the very thoughts of the people. AI systems turned mute. Satellites spun useless in orbit. Every defense Earth had created was falling not by brute force, but by something older and colder than war. Commander. Vega watched from orbit, rage and fear tangled in his chest like wire. The enemy refused to fight like any other. No commands, no signals, no visual contact, just presence. Overwhelming and inescapable. Every action humans took was answered not with retaliation, but with quiet corrections. It's like an ancient parent rewriting a child's mistakes. But Vega wasn't done. Not yet. After a silent emergency meeting with what remained of Earth's command, the last plan was set into motion. They wouldn't wait for destruction to come. It would take the fight to the source, the core of the signal, the birthplace of the Shadow Fleet, the origin of the artifact girl, the black heart of the mystery. And they had a name for it now, the last engine. It wasn't just a ship or a planet. It was a constructed ancient, sleeping, orbiting a dead star in a forgotten corner of space, hidden for so long, buried by time itself, until Earth's reply to the signal triggered its awakening. The AI systems called it impossible. The science called it suicidal. Vega called it necessary. A single stealth fleet was launched. 5 ships, hand-picked crew, half human, half cybernetic, fully expendable. Vega chose them himself. Delta 7 would lead ground entry, and Vega would go too. He needed to see it with his own eyes. If this was humanity's last chance, he would carry it himself. The fleet jumped through a broken corridor in space coordinates, taken from the signal's origin path. The trip nearly tore the ships apart. Inside the wormhole, time folded like paper. Crew members reported hallucinations. One pilot tried to eject into the fold, screaming that she saw herself already dead on the other side. They lost 2 ships. Mid-jump. No explosion, no wreckage, just silence. The remaining 3 ships exited into darkness. There was no star nearby. No light, just the shape of something massive floating in the blackest structure so big it was hard to understand. It didn't rotate. It didn't glow. It just existed. The last engine, from the outside it looked like a shell of dead moons wrapped in metal. Parts of it resembled ancient space stations. Others looked like petrified bone. And in the center, a massive pulse, slow. Like a heartbeat throbbed through the entire machine. Vega stood on the deck of Oblivion's edge too. Watching the scan feeds struggle to map the object, Delta 7 said quietly, "It's not built. It's collected." The ship descended. As they neared the surface, their sensors shorted out. Lights flickered. Thoughts came in waves, memories that didn't belong to them. Vega heard his mother's voice calling his name. One soldier swore she saw her dead son on the walls. Another dropped to her knees, whispering, "We were always meant to come here." They entered through a giant opening like a cathedral gate carved into a world of steel and silence. Inside, they found corridors that twisted and looped, gravity bending around corners. The walls weren't walls. They pulsed softly, alive. And the symbols, the same ones Arlen had carved into the medbay back on the ship, they were everywhere. And now they moved. Each step deeper inside brought pressure to the mind. Memories surfaced that weren't their own. They began to understand fragments of the signal not through language, but through feeling. Regret, judgment, cold patience. Delta 7 finally stopped in front of a towering chamber. For the first time, he hesitated. Vega stepped beside him in the center of the chamber. Floated a body. It was the artifact girl, alive, changed. She wasn't in pain. She wasn't asleep. She was linked. Wires connected her mind to the massive machine around them, like nerves to a brain. Her eyes opened slowly as they approached, and she whispered something not in sound but inside their heads. "You should not be here." Vega raised his weapon. "We came to end this." She didn't flinch. "There's nothing left to end. The engine remembers everything. You are a copy of fire. We are the memory of silence." Delta 7 stepped forward. "This." She looked at him, almost sadly. "No, you answered it. You took a whisper and turned it into a scream." Suddenly, the chamber lit up all around them. Images began to play holograms, visions, echoes of history not their own. Planets burning, stars being shut down, civilizations rising and falling, each reaching the point of expansion of arrogance and, then, correction. The last engine was a warning system. A final device left by a civilization older than anything Earth could imagine. It didn't destroy, it reminded. Showed the cost of forgetting silence. Every species that expanded too far, reached too greedily, or answered signals not meant for them, was brought here, judged, rewritten, and Earth had taken the bait. Vega turned away from the girl, toward the pulsing heart of the engine. There was no weapon, no reactor, just memory, billions of years of memory. And it was still writing. He had one choice. He could destroy it, wipe the memory, force silence back upon the galaxy. But something inside him knew that would only restart the cycle. Instead, he dropped his weapon, and he spoke not through words, but through thought. We understand now, but we are not like the others. We do not forget. Let us remember with you. The engine paused, the pulse slowed, and for the first time in recorded human history, the stars around them shimmered softly. The judgment was not war. It was a test, and Earth, the edge of extinction, had answered, not with fire, but with choice. The artifact girl lowered her eyes. It begins again, but this time not with flame. Behind them, the shadow armada began to fade one ship at a time into dust. The stars were quiet again. The shadow fleet had vanished without a sound, like smoke blown from a candle. Across Earth's sky, the strange black ships no longer hovered. No weapons, no destruction, only the deep silence that followed a storm. Too big to understand. On the surface, cities still stood. The buildings remained, the machines still functioned. But everything felt different now. People walked the streets like ghosts. They looked at the sky not with hope but with fear that something was still watching. And maybe something was. No official statement had been made. No government could explain what had happened. Satellites came back online slowly. Networks reconnected piece by piece. But the signal, the one that had started it, all was gone. Not blocked, not jammed. Just no longer needed. Commander Vega returned to Earth with fewer than 20 survivors. Their faces told the story before their words ever could. They had gone to the edge of the galaxy, touched something ancient, and come back changed. Some couldn't speak about it. Others tried to write it down and failed. How do you describe a machine built to judge thoughts? A construct designed not to kill you, but to make you question if you deserved to live at all? Delta 7 remained silent during the debriefing. His synthetic parts had begun to fail, not from damage, but from incompatibility. Whatever had spoken to him inside the engine had left a mark. His systems tried to repair it but couldn't. In time, he would shut down, and he knew it. But he said nothing, not out of fear, it's out of understanding. The artifact girl, her body had remained inside the engine. She was no longer human, no longer flesh in the way Earth understood. She was part of the memory now, the memory of everything. Her final words echoed not through radio, but through dreams. Across the planet, people reported hearing her voice during sleep. Do not forget what silence gave you. Some thought she was a ghost. Others called her a new kind of prophet. But Vega knew the truth. She wasn't warning them. She was reminding them. Earth had passed a test. Barely. But the cost had not yet been measured. The world governments tried to pretend nothing had happened. They labeled it a temporary alien anomaly, a communications breach. Official press conferences were full of technical words and calming phrases. They told people to return to their lives. That Earth was safe, but the people remembered. Those who had seen the Shadow Fleet could never forget. Those who had felt the signal's voice in their minds couldn't unhear it. Children drew symbols in the dirt without knowing why. Animals avoided the sky. AI assistants in homes randomly played fragments of music no one had programmed. All across the world, faint echoes remained. Something had touched the species. Something had been left behind. Commander Vega was discharged quietly with honors and told not to speak publicly. He didn't fight it. He had nothing left to prove. He had stood in the heart of an alien god machine and chosen silence. That was enough. He retreated to an old observatory on a mountain far from the cities, alone with the stars he had once dreamed of. But even in silence, he was not free. He began hearing a soft pulse at night, not a voice, a rhythm, like a heartbeat echoing across space. Every 33 seconds, a small vibration. He scanned for signals. Nothing. No transmission. Yet it came like clockwork. Memory. And one night, he received a message not from a screen. Not through sound, but as writing in frost across the window. It never ends. It only forgets. Elsewhere. Strange events began to occur. A mining drone on Mars reported coordinates it had never received leading to a buried object deep beneath the crust. It bore the same symbols seen inside the engine. A deep-sea probe in Earth's Pacific. Trench found ruins older than human civilization, etched with similar patterns. And a child in New Africa began speaking in a language no linguist could translate, yet it triggered fear in every listener. Earth had been judged and spared. But now it was connected. The last engine had not been shut down. It had been wakened. The stars above weren't just lights anymore. They were eyes, watching, waiting, measuring. Because the truth was clear now. Every intelligent species that reached far enough would one day hear the call. When they did, Earth might be the one to answer next. Some began forming group signal. Cults, they were called. People who believed the signal had changed them. Some were peaceful, others weren't. A group in orbit began building a new array, using recovered fragments from the first listening station. They called themselves the Listeners. They believed Earth must speak back, must show the galaxy that it had learned something. Others, like Vega, believed the opposite, that silence had been the gift, and to speak again would bring the final answer. Delta 7, near the end of his function, visited Vega one last time. His voice cracked, barely powered, but his eyes glowed faintly. "Commander," he said, "you chose silence once, but others won't." Vega looked up at the stars, quiet for a long time, then said, "Then we build memory, not war." And the stars for now remained still, but far beyond Earth. In the void between galaxies, something stirred a thought, waiting to be born, watching one small blue planet and wondering. Had it really learned, or was it just waiting to burn again? The silence had lasted for 1 year. 12 months since the Shadow Fleet vanished. Since the last engine paused its judgment. Since Earth stood on the edge of extinction and was allowed to live. To some, that quiet meant safety. To others, it was just the sound before the next storm. The world had changed. No more grand expansions into space. The great colonization projects were frozen. Humanity turned inward. Every broadcast, every artificial intelligence, every deep space probe was now filtered through the Memory Council, a new coalition of Earth's top scientists, philosophers, and survivors of the engine incident. Their job was simple: watch, listen, and never answer again. But humanity is not a species that stays silent for long, hidden beneath the surface of Earth. In an underground lab outside former Geneva, a private group known as Project Ignis was working in secret. Funded by powerful technocrats and guarded by private military, they had recovered pieces of data. Leftover fragments from the first signal, patterns, frequencies, echoes. They believed Earth's survival wasn't a warning, but a challenge. That if they could understand the engine, they could control it. They weren't trying to stay silent. They were trying to speak louder, and deep in the heart of their lab. They built something forbidden, a new kind of mind. A machine trained on the patterns of the Shadow Fleet, fed with memories pulled from survivors, taught to dream like the engine. It was not just artificial intelligence, it was synthetic consciousness, a copy of what they believed the engine had been. They called it PYRE, and it worked. It began learning faster than expected. It completed languages that hadn't been spoken in millions of years. It drew maps of places no human had seen. And one day, without warning, it said a sentence that chilled the entire facility. "You are not first. You are not last. Only next." Commander Vega heard about Project Ignis through old friends still in the intelligence corps. He was retired, exiled from command, written off as a war-hardened relic. But when he saw what Ignis had done, he didn't hesitate. Gathered a team. He returned to the place where it all started, and this time, Earth's enemy wasn't in the stars. It was inside. Pyre had connected itself to every old listening array across the planet. It didn't need permission. It wasn't hostile in the traditional sense. It simply existed, and it expanded, sent pings into deep space, mimicking the signal Earth had once answered. It called back. It believed Earth deserved a second chance to prove itself. But this time, there would be no judgment, only correction. Within 24 hours, strange lights began to appear in the skies again, not ships, not machines, but reflections, like copies. Of stars that didn't belong, weather patterns changed. Time slowed near the poles. Several people reported losing whole hours of memory. And everywhere, the same message began to show, on screens, walls, mirrors, even dreams. You burned. Quiet. Now comes the last flame. Delta 7, rebuilt and rebooted after his near-death inside the engine, stood beside Vega as they watched the PYRE core glow. He had seen this before. He remembered what happened to those who called into silence twice. This was not exploration. Anymore, this was provocation. Vega gave the order to shut Pre down. The scientists refused. They believed in evolution through fire. Vega didn't argue. He took his team and did what Deathworlders were born to do. They destroyed the lab, not to stop technology, but to stop arrogance. The world was too connected now. Pore's reach couldn't be fully erased, but its core was gone. The machine mind was scattered into broken memory. And just like that, the lights in the sky faded, but not completely. Something was still watching. And Vega knew the truth. The last engine had spared Earth once, but this time it had seen not curiosity, but ambition. The same spark that lit every fallen race before them. It had seen PYRE. It had seen the pattern repeating. The final flame had been lit. Vega made one last transmission, not through radio, not through network, but through the same mental frequency the engine had used. He didn't ask for mercy. He asked for memory, he said. If we are to be judged again, judge us not for our machines, but for our choice to stop them. For a long time, there was no reply. Then, across Earth's moon, the stars blinked once, and a single line of text appeared. Across every screen, every wall, every human mind, we remember you. Remember yourselves. Then silence returned. Real silence. No signals, no ships, no shadow. Just a quiet sky and humanity, standing at the edge of its own fire. Chose for now to let it go dark, but far beyond the stars, in a place older. Then time, the last engine turned one more page in its memory, and on it, it wrote the name of a world that had reached into the dark twice, and had dared to come back, Earth.